You're listening to Till the Bottom. For better or for worse, everything is fascinating if you dig deep enough. If you agree with this, then this podcast might be right for you. Let's start talking.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Till the Bottom. We are your hosts, HOSTS, host, not guest, Mitra and Nacho. And today we have for you a guest that goes by the name Mitch. Well, his name, am I allowed to say your name? Great. Matthaus Mittasch, aka Mitch. Matthaus is a postdoc. He's working in the Max Planck for cell biology. And what you do for a living, if I remember correctly, was something like build optical setups for studying what exactly?
Biomechanics.
And that's cool, but we're not going to talk about that at all in this episode. This episode will be mostly dedicated to talk about politics. Politics, specifically in the German context. And which shows this episode for you because here Mitra is the contact that knows you, and he thinks that you have a very particular life experience regarding in the context of politics, and I thought it was very interesting. So I don't know if you would like to more or less introduce why is Matthaus here with us and on why you think it's.
Yeah, I guess the focal point is towards fascism, and so Germany is a very liberal place, but we still have a small fraction of alt-right population. And Matthaus, coming from the eastern part of Germany, from Bautzen, has had several experiences when he was a small kid. And over time, he has encountered them more often and eventually at his own will, right? To really explore and try to reduce the whole situation, or even try to understand to start with? Or was it mostly like the first time you faced some sort of a situation where there was a fascist attack on you?
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with fascism, where that interest come from, why is it so important for you to discuss these topics and so on?
Okay, so naturally I was born or rose up very liberal, I have to say. My parents were super cool. Yeah. And even though I'm German, they always called me like Fiji back in the day. So it's a rude word for Vietnamese people.
Okay.
Oh, why is that?
I don't know, because they might maybe thought that my eyes look a little bit.
So just appearances.
Yeah, just from my appearance.
So they thought there was some Vietnamese touch in you.
There was some Vietnamese touch in me. Like, finally, even though the cops, it's been a couple of years, I had to go to the cops, and they asked me if I have a Vietnamese touch, but they said it in a very rude way, Einschlag, So it's crazy.
Yeah. So who are these people?
Random normal people.
Random normal people.
Not like particularly neo-Nazis, just like random normal people, other kids, normal people, nothing special.
And that would have an effect on you?
That for sure had an effect on me. I got angry because I always thought it's not correct. And then, I was, first of all, like, a hip hopper, and then I was in skating and punk rock. So obviously alternative youth culture, and particularly, you were by definition the enemy of right-wing people. This is the people they looked up to beat up.
Which year were you born?
I was born 86.
86. So that was before the Berlin Wall came down,
Exactly. Right? I was born in GDR. I was 4 years old when the wall came down, so I cannot remember. But what I sure felt are secondary effects, what your parents and your grandparents told you. And I mean, particularly politically, the early 90s, even though I was a young kid, so there was a lot of uncertainty, So there were Nazi youth clubs and left-wing youth clubs, and they were fighting against each other.
And these Nazi youth clubs, they were like these organizations, they were very, very, like the origin was from the East?
I don't want to say that they are
Or
organized
there was-
Nazis, but a lot of them were not organized.
Okay.
So how it is sometimes in the youth culture.
But racism against whom? Not Jews, right? Or
I would say back in the days it was, so in East Germany there are not many foreigners.
Yeah.
Back in the days there were not many foreigners. It was more against liberal and alternative people. People that were gay, people that were punks. Maybe the few foreigners they could find, they tried to beat them up. But mainly they were focused on, I would say, like left-wing people.
Okay, now I just want to put things a little bit into perspective now because, I mean, continue listening to this story just like in this way, it's painting some sort of Mad Max scenario where there's a widespread disorder and a lot of extremist political activism happening at the time. And I don't know if you can more or less gauge for us how prevalent were these ideas on the extremes, you'd say, like back in the day, first of all, or what you remember from your youth, how popular, how numerous, let's say, were these groups of people that were very much into right-wing extremism or downright Nazism. So, or was it more like because you happen to be a person that were always in some way interested in politics or at the vanguard of political movements, that you happen to encounter them more than the average person? Or how? I mean, because I have no idea really.
So, okay. Back in the days, what is different to nowadays is that the broad mass was not thinking about politics. The East Germans, they were fed up by an totalitarian system, and what they were looking for was jobs. They were looking for jobs. Yeah. They were looking to get a new car, which they didn't get in the GDR. They were looking to buy a house and whatsoever, like the broad mass was not political at all. Even though they had this, like...
Would you say they were fed up with politics actually because of the stark communist regime before or communist system? Something like that?
Yes. I would say so. So they were not political, even though they had all these like stereotypes, so these racist stereotypes, they were already there in the 90s. And if you look really deeply into the literature and what people wrote in the 90s, you see the trend. You see that racism and all these trends were already there, but people were so focused on themselves, and there were actually no really foreigners you could actually blame. But if I was a kid and a car was stolen, it was the guy from Poland. Like stuff like this was around always. So it's nothing new.
Who steals the bikes?
Yeah.
The black market, or the Czech black people.
So exactly.
Black market.
So in terms of organizational level, so there were obviously organized neo-Nazis, and they were very dangerous to single people. But they were not really dangerous in a broad political sense. Yeah. There were like maximum 1-2%. It took very long until the NPD, the really right-wing nationalist party, got 5%.
So one question that I have is, so in West Germany, as far as I know, as a consequence of the Second World War, history was taught in such a way that everything was focused on how horrific the whole the World War situation was and how much of a player Germany was there. So a lot of West Germans say that they're almost they get so much information about the World War that they cannot not be liberal. Like there is
you mean because of some sense of guilt and
yes, it's put in like what I find with Germans, for instance, is that they are more often than not. Of course, I have a skewed view on Germans because I meet only the scientists. It's a very, very liberal. Like it's the most liberal population that I've come across. Like however much I've traveled around in the world, because and I think part of the roots is because they are so conditioned while they were educated through their entire childhood. Yeah. So, and that may not be the case with East Germany pre the coalition.
So, I was taught the West German school system, obviously. If you compare it, so what's missing in East Germany is the 68 movement.
Okay.
So they didn't have this.
So what is the 68 movement?
So in West Germany, there was a big revolution in 68 where the young generation, the students, said, my dad, my grandpa, they were nationalists and fascists. And there was this very strong left-wing movement, right? Yeah. So
fueled by some sort of historical guilt.
Exactly. Yeah, as well. Yeah. And guilt is probably the right word.
Yeah.
In East Germany, the ridiculous thing is, they said, hey, we are socialists now, and by definition, we are anti-fascists. And by definition, in a communist system, there cannot be any fascism. So, and this really thinking about what means guilt and what means your own past and history was not really worked out well in school system. And it was in a very... I don't know what I want to say. No,
so in the generations before you,
my
they
parents,
didn't have the context.
Sure, they learned it in school, but in a not as open way. So they were more. It was more a preach. So they got preached. Haha, we are now communists. Yeah. It's nice internationalism. We are together with all our communist friends. But there was racism in the GDR as well. But nobody talked about this, you know. And even nowadays, that's an actually very recent topic that you really do research on how racism and fascism was working in the GDR. Because officially, by definition, they said we don't have this here. And that's an interesting viewpoint that you actually have to consider.
Yeah, sure. So in a communist regime, there are so many things that happen some sort of underground and unrecognized. Cannot be spoken out because they just don't fit within the ideal framework of what a nice communist regime should work. So probably this is one of those things that there's no fascism in a communist system, and this is just some sort of element of dogma.
Exactly.
And whether it happens or not underground, we are just not we are going to turn a blind eye to it and not acknowledge it. Now, I want a little bit of clarification on the terms that we are using, on the words that we're using, because so you talk about Nazis that you encounter every now and then as you were growing up, but these Nazis, how much do they resemble the original Nazis? Because I suppose probably they were not planning the extermination of the Jewish people or something like that. There must have been some sort of transformation, and for some reason we have kept the same word to label both groups of people. Let's say the original Nazis and the classic stereotypical Nazi that everybody's familiar with from their courses of history or from movies about the Second World War and so on. And these Nazis that you encountered as you grew up, that I'm assuming that they were not under exactly the same kind of goals. So probably there are very likely common traits between both. For instance, some deeply held racism might be, or fascism, which is the use of violent means to impose your political views and make your political system the regime system. But other than that, I don't know what else is.
Well, they are called neo-Nazis and not Nazis anymore. Right?
So the classical Nazi, really the classical neo-Nazi from the 90s, was proud of saying, I'm a Nazi.
Okay, so they will openly say that.
They were openly saying this, and they were openly saying that you have to gas the Jews and you have to gas all other people. And so there are all these neo-Nazi rock music. So there is, in these songs, they sing how they stab Jews and all this stuff. So a really classical neo-Nazi is really...
She's like a carbon copy.
Yeah, it's really in favor of all these war crimes that have been performed by the Nazis. That is probably the big difference to the modern right-wing movement in general, like the AfD, where people share these racist thoughts, but they wouldn't straight away say I'm a Nazi because they always say I'm not. And this is where you have to make the difference.
That is how they start the conversation.
So this is how they start the conversation. But if you go to the real extreme right wings, so for instance, like lately there was in Ostritz this Saturday, there was a Schild und Schwert festival. This is where like really the extreme right wing come together and they do fights and Nazi hardcore. And there they're proud. They say I'm a neo-Nazi. This is really
where did this happen?
It's not so far. It's at the Polish border in Ostritz.
And it happens regularly.
So these concerts, they happen since the 90s regularly. Pretty much every weekend somewhere in Germany there are these. And this is where you have to
And what do they do there?
They drink, they sing, they make up what they want.
So like a regular concert, but for like-minded people.
Yeah. So and this is where you have...
But this is a minority. Of
exactly. And that's what I want to say. So if you look in organizations like Blood and Honor, Combat 18, like really militant right-wing extremists. So I would say they are broadly organized in something what you call a Kameradschaft. It's organized neo-Nazis. And in Saxony, we speak about 2,000 militant neo-Nazis. So out of 4 million people. So they're not, in absolute numbers, not so many.
It's good to get the numbers.
So this is roughly the number. And I would say roughly 1,500 militant hooligans.
On top of that.
It's very difficult because some are in, some are out.
Because if it's an organization, you get the numbers, but otherwise you always have the gradations. Right?
So let's say we have in Saxony roughly 3,000 organized militant neo-Nazis.
Okay.
That would proudly say, I love Adolf Hitler and I want to kill Jews. So there's 3,000. But on what's, I think, a big problem nowadays is that you have 20 to 30 people that openly have these racist and nationalistic thoughts. And it's
20 to 30,000.
No, like 2 to 3,000, you can have 30%.
Okay.
Or 25%, people that vote for the AfD. Let's say 20% that are actually like openly now saying these racist things. And I think this is new, that it is so big and so many people are officially and openly saying this. And this is what I think, what's the big difference, that this momentum moved much more to the right.
One important point, because, so people in Germany know what the AfD is, but very likely people out there from other parts of the world will know, like, what's that? What's AfD? So
the AfD is the alternative for Germany. It's an populist right-wing party. So from a national patriotic liberal wing to a right-wing, almost extremist wing. So the party now has a broad coverage. It started more as this national liberal, but this wing actually dropped out. So the founders and the people that actually make it big, Bernd Lucke and Petri, they dropped out, and now the party moved even more to the right. Very similarly to the Front National in France, and what the Front National is nowadays doing, they now try to go a little bit more to the AfD-like way, a little bit away from this like super right-wing thing officially. And I mean, this is a very similar pattern what you see to other European countries, Poland with the peace, Hungary, even Austria, everywhere.
That's a general movement.
It's a general movement, and these parties are now so successful because they have now this modern shape. So they are not as this NPD, the really right-wing party that was really in this NSDAP style, but in a modern way. And now the AfD has, I don't know how I want to say it, but they really moved a little bit away from looking like a right-wing or extremist right-wing party to something more liberal. But I would say they're as dangerous.
Would you say this is so opportunistic? Because, for instance, just to paint a general picture of what has happened here in the last, 6-8 years or something like that, since the Syrian crisis exploded, is that there has been a lot of immigration coming from Middle Eastern countries, North African countries, and that spiked a movement. I would say probably mass movement would not be an overstatement, especially in some parts of Germany, mostly in the east and mostly in this city or the surround. This is the city of Dresden, mostly in the surrounding areas, where people organize themselves into this Pegida brand, which is it means the Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of Europe, and my impression is that in the beginning this movement started with a very hardcore of what you would call definitely right wing. I don't even know if extremist applies or not, but more people that identify clearly themselves with the right wing and that had a general bad attitude towards immigration and that sort of stuff. But then it grew and people, it contained people that for one reason or another thought that one big concern of modern Germany is mass immigration, and they are unsympathetic or they are against that. And some of them might subscribe to other more questionable or more extremist right-wing views, and some of them might just be kind of like a single issue Pegida goer that are concerned about this. So this probably offer a platform for parties like AFD to arise because they saw there's a base there. There's a large group of people that, again, they might be more to the right in general, or they might just be signing on to this particular issue of mass immigration, but we have like an umbrella for all of them, and then they gain strength from that base. And I think the point I'm trying to make is that, again, it's numbers matter. It really matters how many of these people that, for instance, sympathize with Pegida are skinheads that say, yeah, I think it would be nice if we could just gas all the Jews. And how many of them are single issue people that don't like the idea of open borders, of mass immigration, but they are not taking the full package of the extreme right.
I mean, so you're completely right, and this is what you can already look at the pictures, you know. So who did Pegida really attract? It's men from 30 to the 70s. Like, actually, like a lot of old people go there. And the classical neo-Nazi, you know, like what we talked about and all these bad words and bad things, they were part of it. But now, like, the big movement comes from, like, normal, ordinary people. But, you know, you have to consider one thing. When Nazi Germany got to power, you know, not all people that were waving for Adolf Hitler were, like, super dogmatic Nazis. They were normal people, you know, and this is the trend that you see nowadays as well throughout Europe. It's not like that, like, super dogmatic fascists, suddenly they're all, like, walking like soldiers in a row. They're normal people that are somehow fascinated, and they really like this style of authority, and then some strong person, a white man, is in charge and leads them. So somehow this is this new pattern that we didn't have in Germany before so much.
So this is a good point, right? Like, it can't be that when the original Nazi movement has started, like during the war, before the Second World War, that everyone was intrinsically fascist. But they bought into some elements of it.
To walk the whole mile. Yeah.
So they bought into some elements of it. And your argument here is that in principle, everyone is not a hardcore fascist out here. They are also buying into some elements of it.
Yes.
And are convinced by it.
But willingly.
No, but I guess Hitler came up with points which a lot of people who were very normal, just like the regular population that we are aware of,
but I would be
found legitimate.
Anti-Semitism was a general pattern that a lot of people unfortunately agreed on.
Yeah, but okay, the way when my issue is that when you paint it like that, okay, so I'm going to ask you, you reply to my question however you see fit. Are you genuinely scared that something like a reification of the path that led Germany towards a Nazi regime somehow might, I don't know, be replayed in the current.
I mean, I think yes, and we have to. I mean, look around Europe. I would say probably because of the German history, Germany is not completely swapped yet. Mm-hmm. But I mean, France was very close to get a fascist government.
Yeah. But this is a different thing, right? Like what he's saying is you're talking about mass murder and stuff.
No, go the full.
But that is not going to happen. It would be extremely regressive right-wing ideologies, but it will not recreate what is happening in the past.
I don't know if it's about a genocide, but you don't know. So what happens if you have a lot of nationalist countries next to each other? This can easily turn into a war. Why not? You know, like that is the problem of fascism, that one thinks that my nation is superior to others. And by definition, since I feel more powerful, and particularly if you put it in a genetic context, if you say my people are better people than others and they don't have the right to live next to me except as my slaves or something, this is what the intrinsic behavior of fascism is. This is a very pronounced source for a major conflict. And I am afraid that stuff like this happens. Because I see it around us that we live in the worst state in Germany, in Saxony, with the highest voters for AfD. So next year there is...
So how much was what percent was it?
So for the Bundestagswahl, nearly 30% voted for the AfD.
Yeah.
So and if there would be votes tomorrow for the Saxon government, which is next year, we talk about the same numbers. So 30% willingly vote for a right-wing party.
Yeah, but
and
even
which direction the trend is going?
You never know.
You never know. Because there's so many factors playing in.
But even the AfD is not led by a Hitler figure. I mean, I understand the idea of being cautious and being vigilant and worry about the trajectory in which things seems to go. But I'm always very worried of over alarmist forecasts because they depend on so many different factors that, and you know, I think it was what Mark Twain, the one that said that history never repeats, but it often rhymes, or something like that. So it's possible. It's very likely, I would say, if you extrapolate the current political trends in several European countries, where more and more people vote for or are sympathetic to right-wing parties, that mostly it's almost as a single issue thing. It's mostly about immigration. It's mostly about containing, stopping, or controlling otherwise mass immigration. That's the main point in which their platforms depend on, and that's the main kind of attractor that they use to get more and more voters. So my point is, that becomes increasingly attractive. You get more people voting for right-wing parties. So far, they have lost, but they have been close enough to elicit this kind of concern. But I don't see... I can't let my imagination run wild and paint some sort of fiction story that would leave me from having a party in power which, for instance, wants to stop mass immigration, and how that might lead you to a situation in which race wars happen again or something like that. I mean, I could build up some sort of storyline that takes you from that initial point to that final point. But I'm very, very cautious of not letting my I wouldn't say my own bias to filter into that storyline, but these issues are so complex. They involve massive sociological movements that are incredibly hard to predict. I mean, if we had the tools to predict this kind of behavior, mass behavior, sociology would be an exact science by now, and it's not the case. It's very complicated. There are so many forces. So, I can grant that there are more and less plausible trajectories that might lead you to that extreme point. But again, I'm very wary of thinking that's of evaluating how plausible that actually might be. So I can see closer, let's say, into the future. Say, I can completely concede and completely see very plausible the situation in which AfD, somebody from AfD even becomes a chancellor of Germany. Let's say it's possible. It can happen.
But his point is also pointing out that it's not. So I'm assuming that you, when you're thinking about this thing, you're just not fearing for Germany, but all the neighboring states.
Exactly. I don't care about Germany.
Maybe not even neighboring states, but you go to South America, everything is getting right wing. Exactly. You go to Greece, everything is getting right wing. India is right wing.
Mm-hmm. But right wing does not equal Hitler and war.
But you're taking it to the other extreme, right?
Exactly.
What you are doing is taking it to the other extreme.
I don't want to go into that extreme. I want to stop at right wing and the issues that they themselves say they are concerned about, and that you can plausibly say if more of them get into power, what kind of things, what kind of change you can more or less assuredly see happening. For instance, stricter border controls, shutting down immigration, that kind of stuff. That's more plausible.
Okay. So, couple of things. So first of all, the AfD said one should shoot people at the borders. So first of all, so this is what they say. If you go to Begida, they say the people in the ocean or in the Mediterranean Sea, they should drown. So you should just shoot the boats and they should die.
Yeah, but these are very emotional.
No, but this is what they say. So, second of all,
who's they? The
Pegida people and politicians from the AfD openly said stuff like this.
Yes.
So, second of all, let's say even a moderate right-wing party. So, what would happen? That people like me maybe would go to jail. People like you wouldn't be here anymore because they would say we need a national strong thing. Why should we take people from India if we have our own smart people? This is, for instance, what if you look into the politics of these very right-wing parties, this is what they say. First of all, a study position for Germans and then for others, which I think is terrible. I'm so happy that you guys are here and we can have this discussion, right? But this is what these people want. And this is not a genocide yet. But this is a goal, or this is something that could happen in the next 5 years very easily. And one has to say one thing. What did happen in the last 5 years in Germany? Nothing. People have jobs. The unemployment rate goes down. There were pretty much very, very few terrorist attacks. So there was no bad situation, and still there are 30% or 25% that are attracted to the AfD. Let's say, let something bad happens. Let have 10 really or 15 really bad incidents happening. And the unemployment rate for some odd reason goes up by factor 2. How will the system then look like? Yes. Much worse than now. Yeah, and this is what I'm afraid of, that even though everything is running very smoothly and well, I mean, at least from a capitalistic point of view, and I think maybe we should at some point talk about the social drought that we have in our societies. And maybe this is one of the reasons why people feel so unhappy. It's not because of the foreigners, it's because they feel betrayed and they don't feel that they can take part in society if you cannot buy a Mercedes-Benz. But this is not, but maybe, I don't know if you should go now in this direction or if you're interested in this.
Do you want to say something? Yeah. I want to reply to that, but you also.
Yeah. So this is where I think I have a little bit of a problem. So you came up with two anecdotal stories, right? Like you want people, like Pegida people say that these guys should drown, and then on the AfD people want to shoot people on the border. That is going to, like, you're listening to the very extreme ones. I'm saying at a moderate level, like, you also know that even if they come to power, those kind of things will not happen. Why?
Because they don't tend to, for instance.
No, because this is not how it will, like, in the current system, that level of anarchy where you can do that kind of things, there are enough checks and around for not to happen in the first world.
Why? But things can change.
So you're saying that they will completely overturn the regime.
It's possible. I don't hope so, and I don't think so. But it can happen.
This is where I have a disconnect with the current left.
It can happen. You just asked me whether it's possible.
But possible is not plausible. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
Possible means that you can imagine.
So the thing is, I think all these problems need to be looked slightly from, like, why are there so many people on the other side?
So if you ask me if I believe that this will happen, no. So I hope not, because I always believe in the good thing, and I hope that this is not happening. And if you would ask me for a probability, I would say 10%.
Yes.
At the moment.
Yes.
At the moment. But, at the moment, we're talking about 2-3 million people that want to come to Europe. Let's say in the next 20-30 years, there is a huge climate change or something. I now paint the devil at the wall. There's a huge climate change, and suddenly we have 50 million refugees. What will happen then? How do we deal with this situation? And how will a society swap? So, what I want to do, I want that this doesn't happen, because we have educated and open-minded people that think, hey, let's start now and shape our world into a better place, that we get rid of these gradients, these social and economic gradients that lead to these fluxes in the end, It's a physical behavior. If you have a good situation, a bad situation, sure, you want to go there. But you could look at East Germany. They are the biggest migrants in entire Germany. So many people left the GDR, and so many people left East Germany after the wall came down, because there were jobs in West Germany. And obviously you go there because you can have a better life. And what we have to do is we have to make the world we have to really enforce international solidarity, such that
Sure. I get that. But I just want to reply to, because before we run further away, I want to reply to some things that you said before, and now there are so many things out there that it's hard to decide which one I want to shoot first.
Yeah.
So, one. Yeah. So basically, what a little bit of a follow up on what you said. So you're picking up, and I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm saying that you're picking up some of the most radical rhetoric that is out there, thrown by people in the AfD, for example, that if we get into power, we'll shoot immigrants. I'm not gonna say that nobody said that, or that they didn't say that, or they don't have the intention to do something like that, or that's not my point. My point is that, first, it's possible. It's possible that somebody in the AfD with a considerable position of power has that opinion and wholeheartedly feels that that's what he would want to do if he had the chance and could get away with that. So those people exist. That's sure. That's has to be racists of the worst kind that want to gas the Jews or somebody or anybody that don't have their same skin color. They exist. That's true. Now, something that we acknowledged in the beginning is that people that have bought into those ideas to that hardcore level are also a small minority that might have a disproportionate amount of power if they have the means to get there. And that's something that people should be concerned about. So I'm not saying that it's always useful to put it this way, to be prepared for the worst, to have a contingency plan which includes all possible scenarios. Now, something else that happens in politics is that the rhetoric that people, that, for instance, candidates use during their campaigns, it's always harsher or more radical or more idealistic or more extreme to what they actually end up doing when they are in power. And this is in the left and in the right. This happens in both sides.
In both directions, yeah.
In both sides. So, I mean, you can Trump, all the crazy things he said, and in the end, it's not so easy that he implements. For instance, building the wall. It becomes harder and harder that's actually going to happen for good, and that's great. But if you were listening to what he was saying in the campaign, that he chanted in his rallies, build the wall, build it up, blah blah blah, or send Hillary to jail or stuff like that, and then you say, okay, if he gets into power, I confidently believe that that's gonna plausibly happen. I would say, well, let's see. It's terrible that people rally around somebody that says such stuff, which is nonsensical in so many levels. But once they are there, they have some sort of reality crash with the system.
So this is exactly where I have the problem.
The system that does not allow, even if they actually want to do that. So the wall seems very implausible at the moment. Hillary is not going to jail. Obama didn't close Guantanamo in the first day, or didn't withdraw the troops from Iraq also in the first week, as he said he was going to do if he got into power. So this is rhetoric, and then is the actual achievement of getting into the position of power. And then you see the difference between the rhetoric that was used before and what they actually end up doing. Again, good to be prepared, good to have contingent scenarios playing out in your mind about what you would do or what the measurements we should follow as a society if one of these crazy extremist people manages to get into power. That's great, but there's a difference between what's possible and what you can imagine happening and what's plausible. That's one thing.
I completely agree.
So it's not even kind of a disagreement. It's just kind of sketching this a little bit more.
Can I
in more
add
detail.
to that?
Yeah.
So when I said this is where I have the problem, I don't. So most of the things you listed out are things that I'm also compassionately for. But when I think that when you start with statements which are the most hardcore possibilities of things happening, then you already get emotional, and then you already stop thinking in the way which you can actually think of something constructively. So for instance, if your thinking is that if we have a very right-wing government, it's going to homogenize the population, immigration laws will be stricter, these kind of things, then you start thinking about why the mass population is actually thinking in this direction and how we can address that issue. Instead of thinking that, oh, these guys are absolute assholes and we have to just fight them. So one is absolute antagonism, and the other one is to try to be in their footsteps and try to see where there is a fundamental issue and what we need to change. Do you get what I'm saying?
I completely get what you're saying.
So one, if we tend to antagonize each other, then the problem doesn't even get addressed.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so maybe you misunderstood me. I don't have to say that, like, this is what I said. We have to work on our societies.
Yeah.
And this is not the antagonism. I don't say one should kill them.
Yeah.
So I have to say one should educate people to a more open and peaceful way. But like, as you said, sure, I don't think, and I hope that there won't be genocides, but if you look what happened in Poland or in Turkey overnight, a lot of people went to jail. And this can happen very easily. So let's say the AfD would get in charge, that they put a couple thousand or more people that don't fit into their way of thinking go to jail overnight. This is very plausible. This is extremely plausible.
But they will get a lot of backlash from
whom?
From the international...
Did Turkey get the backlash? Did Poland get the backlash?
Yeah,
but Germany definitely will, because you have enough liberals in your population who will
but then people get afraid. Like, that is the general pattern how repression works.
People, and you cannot compare it with Turkey.
Turkey is a very weak democracy.
Yes, it's almost tending towards totalitarianism.
Yeah, exactly. But still, they had the power to overnight kick nearly 100,000 people out of their jobs and putting thousands of people into jail. And from Poland, personally, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if Poland would make such a move, I would have said, no, look, Poland is developing so nicely. I know so many young people that are so motivated. They want to do something, they have an international mindset. And then suddenly, it swapped very quickly. And I was really surprised how fast it went.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand that. I'm way more shocked about the developments in Poland than, for instance, in Turkey. Just because of the nature.
Actually, can you elaborate on the developments in Poland a bit?
Yeah. just a little bit. The nature of first of all, their democratic systems it's very difficult. The democratic system in Turkey is much more feeble and weaker, and the system it has systemic weaknesses, that allow for somebody like Erdogan to get into power and almost single-handedly turn it into a quasi-dictatorship or something like that. Poland, I'm not super familiar with Polish politics. I know a little bit because I work there, and I talk to people, Polish people, quite a bit about this. So it seems to me a stronger democracy, but it's also built upon a very solid ground of more Catholic and more traditionally Catholic society.
Yes.
Which also, people that by default have this apprehension for very dogmatic traditionalist points of view or worldviews to begin with, are also easier to scare somehow. Especially if you scare them on about the point that is very likely to awaken a feeling of insecurity, which is we are very Catholic and very proud of our Catholicism, and now we have this at our doors, these hordes of Muslims and that belong to our religion or adhere to our religion that in many points it's opposite to or antagonistic towards Christianism or Catholicism. So then, we get scared and we are very reactionary. Germany, I don't think it fits both those frames so nicely. So it's again, I don't want to revisit the same discussion of how plausible it is. I can't see.
But one has to say that East Germany, particularly now it's transforming, but after the wall came down, the East Germans were probably on average closer to the Polish people than to the West Germans.
Yeah.
That's good.
And this is still like this. And this is why I always bring this example of Poland, because there are a lot of similarities, And one interesting thing for a lot of East Germans, democracy means if it helps me, then I like it. But if it's not helpful to me, I don't want it. They don't see it as a general concept that sometimes it's good for me and sometimes it's not so good for me, but it's good for other people. And this is a very general pattern in the former Soviet states, that there is an insecurity. The people feel very betrayed for good reasons. So
yeah. I mean, it has happened several times that dictators get to power through democratic means, and then once they are there,
they got whipped multiple times. And
Is there something you wanted to say?
No, I was just wondering, so you could conceive such a possibility in the state of Saxony.
So if there wouldn't be West Germany, so if we wouldn't have had West Germany here in Saxony in the last years, I don't know if we would sit here now like this. I would say West Germany rescued us.
That is concerning though. I do see a plausibility of if you go further to the east of Europe, there are less and less of foreigners out there in general, right?
I know. It might be just my personality or my way of seeing things. I'm extremely cautious in extrapolating scenarios. I don't.
But that's because you're not familiar with the whole dynamics of East Germany.
I can just tell about I hate to use. I'm not a big fan of anecdotal argumentation.
Yes.
But anecdotes collected over a sufficiently long period of time become statistics, or anecdotes collected by many different people. At some point, statistics is made of sometimes of anecdotes when you have enough, when you have many. So
right-wing populism is one of these anecdotal stories.
Yeah, sure. So what I want to say, and again, it's anecdotal, but it might be important because I can make a distinction between my experience here in Germany and my experience in Poland, for example.
So you are also partly in Poland.
Yeah, I work there. So I've been here last October. It was my 9th anniversary, so it's kind of a while. And I remember that when I arrived, it was a much more homogeneous society than it is now. And personally, I have not. I I experienced one incident I can remember of something that I can unmistakably say was a racist incident from a grandma. I was with my girlfriend in a cafe buying coffee, and then this grandma just stares at us and dresses up, just scans us up and down, and then she just called us Schweine, like pigs. That was it. And I think I would be very dumb if I would let that particular incident affect me very deeply.
But
so
it
I just
does.
kind of let it. No, but it didn't. Not to me. Not to me. The experience of my girlfriend was a little bit different than that, but okay, not to me. So that's my collection of racist incidents here. In Poland, on the other hand, it's different. Now the town where I work there is a small town. It's not a big city. Although, okay, just to summarize it, to condense it. So I've been in Poland. If you put all the time together, I don't know, something like 6 months or something like that. And I have visited too. And in that period of time, I have experienced, let's say, I can remember at least 5 incidents where I can almost unmistakably say those were incidents of racism. Once they kicked me out of a club, for instance, with no reason. When I asked to have a conversation with the manager, the one that was responsible for kicking me out, he just in the end accepted that it was because of the way I looked, for instance. So that was one case. Other incidents where people have tried to physically attack me, shouldering me just because, and I was with a Polish friend, and he told me, yeah, this kind of happens in this town. So you see the difference in the environment. It's rather stark. And the point I wanted to make with this is that I don't want to keep round and round in the discussion about plausibility and possibility and so on. I'm just very careful of painting out future scenarios where things go terribly, terribly, terribly wrong, even though I can accept that there's a certain level of plausibility. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about that. I don't know if you have something to add now, or...
So maybe I can tell you a personal thing where my fear comes from, and this is from actually knowing people, not my family. My family is cool, but friends that are actually, since the wall came down, you could say they're winners. They have 2 cars, they have a house,
Okay.
They go to holiday, all this stuff, and they're full of anger, they're full of fear. And this is actually what...
Why are they full of fear?
I don't know. They are full of fear. They're full of fear of change. Mm-hmm. And this fear of change, they say it's the foreign people that come in here. And this is what makes me so afraid, that there are a lot of these normal people that are so afraid of change. Maybe this is probably the general point. And it's not just like these very few neo-Nazis, right? It's a lot of these people that in the end, I don't know, would throw democracy and the free system away for something...
Safety.
Yeah, for like a strong authority. And maybe you misinterpreted me in the beginning that I think that there will be a major genocide or something. No. But even though what we see at the moment, right, how the climate is changing, that people get yelled on the street, fuck Islam and all this stuff, this is for me already enough to be afraid. Already this is for me enough. So this is already too much.
I mean, I was, in preparation for this talk, looking at statistics because I actually didn't know,
how it is.
I always want to have an overall picture of how the climate is. And in this particular context, I thought it was important to look at statistics of hate crime.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was going to find. I kind of imagined, based on the increased immigration, I imagine that there would be a lot of anti-Muslim hate crime or something like that. But what I found out is kind of more disconcerting that is not so clear. I looked at the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, and they collect statistics from many different countries. And the picture changes somewhat from countries to countries. But in Germany, first probably I have to define hate crime. Hate crime is a punishable offense that is committed against a particular group of people because of something that bias against their identity markers or prejudice against that. So you can a hate crime against a homosexual because you perceive that person to be a homosexual, a hate crime against a black person because you perceive that person to be black, and that's the motivation of your crime. So that's pretty much a broad definition of what it is. And in Germany,
how do people decide what's a hate crime and what's not?
No.
Yeah, it's not so it's tricky, right? It's tricky because the hate crimes, the offenses vary very widely. So a threat can be considered a hate crime as much as a homicide. So in these statistics, you have everything lumped in together. And let me just cite examples of what I found out that I kind of was a little bit surprised. So in Germany, in 2016, reported by the civil society, international organizations, and Holy See and other institutions, they collected data on 2,150 incidents of hate crime. Then most of them, 1,658, are under the ban of racism and xenophobia. Then you have 136 anti-Semitism, 31 against Muslims, 40 bias against Christians, 276 more than all of the others, except the racism and xenophobia, against gays and people with certain sexual orientation or gender identity. And I was like, okay, I know that they lump in threats, homicide, damage to property, and all sorts of things. So then actually they offer data on like the description of the crimes. And if you go through it, it's what you find the most, it's a lot of attacks against people of a certain sexual identity. So a man walking out a gay bar was physically assaulted by a group. A gay man returning from an LGBT event was insulted and physically assaulted in public transport, and so on. And then you go page after page. Okay, there was one funny one. I thought it was slightly funny because there's a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of crimes perpetrated because of an anti-Semitic bias. And then you go, and there's this one. A group of Spanish tourists was spat at and subjected to anti-Semitic slurs near a Holocaust memorial. So they were mistaken by Jewish people there. They were just Spanish tourists. And then you go through this. And the part that was surprising for me is that I was honestly expecting to see way more attacks against Muslims. Yeah, against Muslims. And if you go, for instance, to the Netherlands, that's the case. In the Netherlands, there's a spike on hate crime against Muslims. In Germany, it's more about xenophobia and racism, but this is a very broad category. There's more like anti-Semitic or against homosexuals or lesbians or people from the LGBT community. In Belgium, it's again more anti-Semitic attacks. Same in the United Kingdom and so on. So my point is that it's not so easy. It's very widely varied, the kind of hate crimes that are produced, and it's not so obvious that the connection is always in the direction of against Muslims, although it's completely. I before researching this, my bias was to think that was going to be the case and that it was going to be very, very obvious, but it's not so obvious, and unless I'm looking at the wrong data. I mean, I tend to distrust somewhat because it's the way it's broken down is not so specific in many cases.
Because I guess I think a lot of the events happen at a level which they are not crimes.
Yeah. So if you look at like Kaushik, for instance, like he's
one of his
he's my lab mate. He's from India, and he said that he got like physically shouted at, and in the last 5 or like 2-3 years or since Pegida started, much more than before. Oof. This is what he said. But like this is again. So, but if you look at, for instance, at the statistics of the Amadeo Antonio Stiftung, how many really physical attacks have been performed. So they see a significant increase in the last years. So since I think 2018 was less than 2017. So maybe the peak was around from 2015 to 2017. When really the refugee crisis was had its full.
And there was a
potential.
vibe at that point.
Yeah, there was a very strong vibe. So I think it's a little bit decaying, but nonetheless, if we draw back the circle to this political movement, the AfD, they are still strong. They still have these political views, and they take the people on this.
No, but there was a good point there. You also need to look at the source, because when you look at who reported the incidents, if you are what's the saying? If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you see that there's a lot of like anti-Semitic hate crimes, and then you look at who's reporting it, it's like the Israel Society for who knows what. Yeah. And then you see in the Netherlands, there's a lot of anti-Muslim, and it's reported by the Turkish Association of blah, blah, blah. So it's complicated. My point is, the point I want to make is that the statistics that you are going to find there don't paint a super clear picture that will necessarily match with your prior, ideas.
I think the one thing that I can say, like, even though I will give you anecdotal evidence, I'm completely convinced about the quality of life has gone down for foreigners, for sure. And that's partly because of the way we think.
Exactly.
Because of the way we think.
Yeah, the mindset.
So I can give, so for instance, this was during the peak period of Pegida, like when they were like crazily, every Monday there were like 30,000, 40,000 people marching.
So another 40,000.
Yeah, so I remember I was coming back home after some party or something, and then this guy just pushed me on the floor. And my immediate instinct was it was something connected to the way I look. Instead of, if it was pre-Pegida, my connection would be, this fucked up drunk asshole. And there are millions of, not millions, but you always find these people, right? So my connection has changed. If now anyone comes and throws a slur at me, I immediately make that connection. And this, for me, is much lower because I realize it's only a few stupid people who are doing it, and then I cannot generalize to the whole population and say that it's... But I have seen it affect so much some of my friends who, when they see like a German party happening on this street, they just avoid that street. And I see it was something that I was taken aback by how much it has affected.
But that's some sort of priming and availability bias. So if you are...
So that's what I'm saying. The quality of life has changed because of the way we have been trained.
So
for sure.
It gets confusing. It gets a little bit messy because if you are reminded here, as you must, that every Monday there's going to be a Pegida demonstration, and that this has been happening for the last, I don't know how many years now. 4 years. So, that's a constant reminder that, Monday, I probably shouldn't go to the center because, who knows what might happen. So I better avoid it because I know that at least a contingent of the people that are going to gather there are going to have views against me just because of the way I look. So you have this constant reminder. It's always there. Monday, maybe I shouldn't because of this is happening, this is happening. And then you experience something like what you just said. Somebody push you to the floor. Your immediate, you will, because of availability bias.
Like experiences of racism,
sure. But the availability bias predisposes you to see every sort of instance when somebody is rude to you through that lens.
Sure.
So it gets messy.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like,
but it's there. What can you do?
Yeah, sure. So you have to find a way to.
Which is where the problem is tricky. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Stoic philosophy? Stoicism.
Stoicism is, you have to be just cold and hard.
Not cold and hard, but there are parts that I like, there are parts that I think are too exaggerated. Like, for instance, but just in a nutshell, the Stoics believed that they never put blame on the world for their situation or on the other people or what other people did for their current situation. And if there was something they kind of detested, let's say, the most, was to feel like a victim of their circumstances or of the people around them. And that can be taken to an extreme, and I obviously don't agree with that, but there's something in it that I am sympathetic towards. So, for instance, again, going back to my experience when this lady called me a Schwein, how should I feel afterwards? I don't want to be I want to be the kind of person that goes through that experience and think, I feel more pity for that lady because she's not gonna change. What's the likelihood that I'm going to give her an argument that it's suddenly gonna make her see that perhaps she shouldn't see brown-skinned people as Schweine? I find it very difficult for that. And so my alternatives are, am I gonna crumble and feel somehow ostracized in the society? And should I hunker down? What should I do about it?
No, but
I feel more a sense of, I'm gonna record this. It's obviously something that it's not easy to forget, but it doesn't affect me in any other way because of the particular nature of this incident. Obviously, it gets harder if you were beaten down. That's a different situation. But
or there are some other instances like I have seen that in some of the Wohnheims here, the apartments here. So some friends of mine were staying in this one of these apartments. So all the people who were foreigner, their names, someone just came and just put a black a mark on it. So that creeped me out. And I get your point. I get your point that so in principle, since Pegida, nothing bad has happened to me. Like I have had one interaction with one gentleman who says that I am using all his money up. But other than that, nothing really has happened. But it has, I have seen it around me among the international population that it has painted a color which has already primed us towards a certain direction. Yes.
You want to say something?
So to maybe have a solution to this and have this very negative discussion, put it into something a little bit more positive. Yeah. So it sounds a little bit weird, but I accepted the fight. So that gives me strength, I say, like when I see those negative things, I say, okay, let's make it better. I don't accept it. I don't accept the situation. I will not crumble. I will stand up for people, for my people, for all people. I don't care where they're coming from. I don't care about nationality. I just stand up and try to make it better, and this gives me strength. And the strength to do something good gives me more power than I lose in these situations. And this is a positive thing of Pegida, that a lot of people that were not political and not organized are now organized and they do something and they feel good. And this is one big problem, that a lot of these people are lonely. And this is what they get in Pegida. It's like to be a part of a movement, to be part of something that has a power, a political force. And this is what
it has a purpose.
Yeah, they go there. Nowadays, it's more like a big sect, They go there, they feel this
community.
But it's natural that this is a good feeling. This is how social organisms like humans work. We gain or we feel good if we are part of a society, of a group. And this is what what I would like is that a lot of people just organize yourselves. Talk about your issues, whatever it is. If it's on work, if it's racism, if it's sexism, just organize yourselves and you feel strong. You will not feel lonely anymore. You suddenly feel connected to other people, and this gives you much more than a big check and money. To be part and to be responsible for people, and you feel that people are responsible for you. They take care of you. I think this is what we have to learn from all this stuff, that all this right-wing movement and all this stuff, we can only prevent if we stick together and say we don't accept this. But the problem is, if we're alone, we don't have the strength to overcome all this struggle. So we really have to be united.
I agree with that. And I would only add that you need to always question yourself, am I fighting a ghost, a straw man, or am I fighting the real thing? That's something that you always need to question.
That's part of the point here, right?
For instance, it's here's my issue. I find it very easy to criticize right-wing extremism because it's very obvious what's wrong with it. It's very obvious. I don't know what argument I could possibly come up with to defend racism. I cannot think of any. I don't find any. It's very easy for me to find what's wrong with that, to find what's wrong with enacting discrimination against somebody for some essential property that somebody has that cannot do anything about it just because it's in its DNA, it's part of his, let's say, essential constituent of that person's identity, and that you cannot do anything to change it. So I find it very easy to fight that. I find it's not complicated. It's a bit more difficult to formulate criticism against, broadly speaking, left-wing ideas, because at least the way they are framed, the way they are framed, many times they're very well intentioned, and the way they are framed, they're couched in nice, good words like equality and that kind of stuff, and let's just fight racism. But when I try to inspect what that exactly means, what does fighting racism means? So if you want to tell me, I want to fight the neo-Nazi, the skinhead that doesn't like black people because they're black, I said, sure. But then you need to start making distinctions. Okay, that's clear racism. But then there are other things like being concerned about immigration. How racist is that? Are people concerned? Is everybody that has a concern about immigration worried because brown-skinned people are coming? Or is there any other more legitimate aspect of that they might be concerned about, and that is divorced from the person's race? And that's when, and a lot of people kind of put everything in the same bag. They are all forms of racism, and I think no. I mean, discrimination comes in different flavors.
Sure.
And not everything is racism. If somebody, I've heard, for instance, from, in this particular case, Indian friends, that, I enter the tram and people stare at me. And they immediately think, well, this is an instance of racism. And then I wonder, well, there's also something called the sore thumb effect. If you are in a society in which almost everybody looks very similar, and then suddenly somebody that obviously looks different shows up, it's almost, there's something called the orientation reflex. The orientation reflex just makes you turn to focus into what's different. And that happens all the time. Even I do it. If somebody enters that has a crazy afro hair, I just looked. Does that come from some hidden racism that I harbor against that person? I don't think so. It's an orienting reflex. It's an reflexive, instinctive attraction towards what looks different, what stands out. And that's that. And I'm not gonna internalize what kind of a person, what would it do for my self-esteem, for instance? If every time somebody turns their head when I enter the tram, turns their head at me and stares at me for a brief moment, and I immediately think,
girl, you will say, oh, she's checking me out.
but if I immediately think, oh, it's because of my race, or
that
somehow
was sexist, by the way.
I immediately come out to the conclusion, oh, it's because of my race, and surely that person is thinking that I am in some way inferior. Obviously, that's gonna create a lot of damage in me in terms of my self-esteem and my perceived worth about myself. And I'm sure that in many of those cases, I would just be wrong. I would be attributing an intention to that somebody that is turning their sight on me, that was not there in the first place. So an important component of racism, an essential component, has to be intentionality. I'm staring at you because I want to intimidate you in some way, because I think that just by the mere fact that you belong to this particular other race, I think you are inferior in some sense. So, and it's very hard. It's very hard to obviously notice in practice when that intentionality is there and when that's not, but that's crucial. That's a crucial element.
Yes. So now we have to talk about
what's racism.
No.
Okay.
So, sure, there are very different flavors, and we have to talk about whether the grandma in the tram can know it, or whether it's intentionally used by professional politicians as their trademark scheme, and they very willingly and do it in a very calculated way. So this is, first of all, what you have to decouple. Mm-hmm. So the one thing is the stereotypes you grew up with, like me. I grew up in a completely white environment, and I know what you talk about. And it took me 20 years to get all these thoughts out of my head, to take the car, to open the box, throw it out, these thoughts I was taught with, these stereotypes. Polish people do this, black people do this, I rose up like this.
No, it's also integrated within the human psyche.
It's integrated it was at least integrated in my society, and I had to get rid of it. So.
It's part of human nature to some degree.
Yeah, because we are brought up as tribal.
Okay. So what I want to say is, if we know that it is like this, and we think it's not good, then we should change it. So we should go in the schools, we should go in the kindergarten, and change our books, And there was always a huge discussion. Why should we now have black people in the books if all kids are white? Yeah, but particularly because of this, that we don't grow up with all these stereotypes and reproduce all these crappy systems for generation, because it is so difficult to get rid of your patterns. The grandma. My mom always says, you will not change my grandma anymore. Mm-hmm. And I say, no, I will change my grandma. But to be honest, it's much more difficult, obviously, to change your grandma than yourself. But still, we have to try, I will not accept this, and I think we can make it better in many aspects.
I like the way you're thinking about this, because, or maybe not, because I don't have a solution for it, because I think there is an instinct for belonging, an instinct for tribe. Mm-hmm. That exists. You want to identify with a certain subculture, and that because of how we have evolved, and there has to be these impulses, as you said, this feeling of community, for instance, and there needs to be ways of diluting the boundaries, and I don't have a solution for it. But if you're saying that
acceptance,
what is acceptance?
That you accept others.
Yes. But that can lead you, so again, yes, I hate to play the devil's advocate, because by and large, I still identify myself more, I check more boxes on the left than I check boxes on the right. Mm. But I'm always in this struggle to identify, to not close my eyes to reality when something it's an issue. So in this, for instance, acceptance as a general principle, I suppose is good. It sounds good. It should be good. Mm. But then there's a limit. Where do you draw that limit? When you accept somebody, when your tolerance is stretched so far that you tolerate the intolerance of someone else. Yes, yeah. So I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you do or anybody. I'm just always try to inspect every one of these, I would call them, let's say, principles. Yeah. I should practice acceptance in almost every context and circumstance, but I'm always trying to say, where's the limit? Mm. After
acceptance,
which
when you
limit?
penetrate the limits of the others, there are very clear definitions actually for this, Mm. So, I mean, you can run around naked if you want to, and that's cool. Mm. But if persons feel not good when you run around naked, then you should get dressed up.
If there are kids around.
Yeah. But everyone is at different, everyone is at different levels of acceptance, right? Like, for instance, if within a small part of Saxony, there are two groups who have constantly had conflicts. So then the acceptance is at that level. And then if you're talking about Germany versus Islam, there is that level of acceptance. Then you talk about a very liberal guy talking in terms of animal cruelty. So there is that level that they are also life, right? So there is that level of acceptance. So everyone is going through their own stages of acceptance, right? So there is where the tricky thing lies, because to someone who is having a conflict in a small part of Saxony, where they are talking about acceptance within each other, to them, if you are preaching about animal cruelty, then there is no context to it, because he has not even gone through the gradations. And that is where the complication lies. When you say the word acceptance, I understand that. But everyone has different degrees or different layers where they have to go through. And it is not as simple as you make it sound.
Some people seem not to have a limitation to that acceptance. I know one case that I just blew my mind away, which is obvious. It's an outlier. It's an extreme case. But just to illustrate that point, that it's possible to accept boundlessly anything. So there was this, I think, a Norwegian politician who was in his house one night, and then one immigrant, a Somali immigrant, entered and raped him. And then he denounced him, or they found out, or somehow the authorities found out, and they had to deport the immigrant because he raped somebody. So I think if there are grounds for deportation, that should probably be one. And then the politician blamed himself somehow. He felt that he was himself at fault because of him, that person had been deported. And he found no fault on the offense itself. So that level of acceptance of somebody else's behavior, where there's no limitation.
So you're arguing that acceptance
it's
at
pathological.
a hardcore level is also...
I wouldn't. So
Sure.
So this is where, for sure, the level, So what I mean with acceptance is more that you are a little bit willing to get out of your own little bubble.
Comfort zone.
I don't know if I mean comfort zone, but, And what my biggest problem is that all these right-wing parties, they don't have any solution. They don't have any solution to the problem. Let's say we build a huge wall around Europe. Come on.
Yeah, no. Ridiculous.
Look at Germany. We are exporting so much stuff. So how can we be against globalization? So what I am really looking for is, and this is really a difficult task, and I think we have to invest a lot of money in really, 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 really big institutes around the world that really think, what do we have to do in all aspects of life, in all aspects of engineering, social development, whatsoever, to find a solution for a global planet. And this is a very, very complex and challenging task.
This is dear to my heart as well.
And this is what we require. We need really, really big institutes with a lot of people that think in all directions and come up with solutions that are not trivial at all.
You know who's got that's something where the left is just fails at terribly. The right wing has think tanks, and some of them are very influential in the United States, in UK for the most part, and they're really good at that, at getting people together in a close place and now think about policies and think about solutions from the perspective of the right.
So the left doesn't
and the left doesn't have that level of...
I think it's wrong.
What
would you say?
Why?
I would say the right wing, what kind of solutions do they have?
No, I'm not saying that they have solutions. I'm saying
they make these think tanks.
Yeah.
But there are a lot, I would say the biggest think tanks are universities, and they are technically left often.
Yeah,
totally. They're totally left liberal.
Sure. So I would say that's wrong in that sense.
No.
Because there are many institutes.
No, because think tanks, they have a direct pipeline to policymakers. So, and they are mostly on the right. And I'm not judging the quality of their solutions. It might be that their solution sucks and they don't work. I'm not saying that.
So you
I'm
talk
saying
about
that,
the structure.
I'm saying that they're good at having that custom of having these think tanks where they get people to just, and they are not bothered or encumbered with educating anybody. They don't have to publish in academia or anything. They are just there for the sake of thinking, coming up with policy architectures, solutions that are somehow filtered through the right wing political lens.
And that you think doesn't happen.
And the left doesn't have that. The universities, sorry, it's true that they lean left, but they don't act as a cohesive unit that its purpose is to come up with policies that have a direct pipeline to the people in power.
But if you have, like, how did the social welfare start in Europe?
Yeah, exactly. So
there must have been think tanks which have come up with these ideas.
I mean, like, traditionally, like anarchist movements, like the unions. The unions are probably the most influential organizations in modern history, because we only work 5 days because of them. We only have these salaries because of them. We only have these holidays because of them. And that are traditional left-wing anarchist, actually before even anarchist organizations.
Are the unions?
But what do you mean?
Yeah, anarcho-syndicalism was the communists. So Marx, they took over the anarcho-syndicalist worker unions. So
by anarchist you mean against the system?
No, anarchist means just self-determination and no hierarchy of power.
So, what about police?
Technically, no. So no, I just want to say that the worker unions they have their roots in the anarchist movement in around 1850, and then it was taken over by classical in Europe, in France, and then it was in Russia, and then it was taken over by classical communist movements, and then the anarchists died out. I mean, at least in the mainstream. But they had the roots.
Sure, but they operate a little bit different than things. I understand.
But no, I just wanted to give you
So India has also been leaning towards the left center for the major chunk of its independent history. So trade unions were very strong. The government built a lot of think tanks which were thinking left, coming up with solutions. Of course, we tend to have a bias against like a supreme power. So a lot of people in the left will argue that they were conspiring and trying to get the industries up.
Yeah.
But I think there were several think tanks, if you talk in terms of the Indian context.
Unions, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from and why you brought the issue of unions when talking about think tanks, for instance. But they're not exactly, they don't operate in the same way. So unions, or social movements, broadly speaking, for them to become effective, they need to reach some sort of critical mass in terms of people that subscribe to that particular idea, and then they can move forward because they have reached this critical mass.
Or they have access to the right people.
Yeah, but they work fundamentally different because they work more like from the bottom up,
sure. Yeah.
And think tanks are more from the top down. It's a different way of operating. How long have we been talking?
We have almost reaching the 1.5 hour mark.
1 hour. Oh, we need to wrap this up, but there's so much stuff. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we moved crazy a little bit.
Yeah. But that's the idea of this podcast. I think, we're not going to do a second part now, but we should definitely get you in another occasion. I think there's so much, and there were some things that I wanted still to reply to. I didn't have the chance, and probably you also had, and so on. We left some holes, I feel, but it's all right. It was bound to happen. But it was I think a very interesting conversation. I don't know what was your take.
So this is how we wrap it up.
I don't know. No. You want?
You were concluding on something before I was checking that thing.
No, I mean I still had a hole to fill from something that he said earlier when talking about
I think
what
we should
motivates.
stick together. That's the most important thing.
I agree. We should stick together. and that is
not leave this place.
And this is where we end the conversation, I guess. I think that's a good place to end the conversation. Stick together.
I think it's the most fraternal ending we have ever had so far.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great. Okay. Yeah, we'll have you again.
Yeah.
Now let's say goodbye to the audience.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you for listening.
Till the next time. If you like what we do, please help us continue doing it simply by subscribing to our YouTube channel, following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, visiting our website tillthebottom.com, or spreading the voice. All the links are provided in the description. Thank you for listening, and until the next time.